Hi there, my name's Rosa Dawn, and today I'm going to be talking about the recent Goldsmiths LGBTQ controversy and why this is a symptom of a larger problem. Give it up, gonna be alright. In previous videos, I've touched upon the hard left ideology that's found its way into the LGBT, particularly queer politics, and especially with the National Union of Students. Whether it's the collectivism found in the NUS's own conferences, to self-identified communists like the currently suspended trans officer Jess Bradley being given positions of power, it's hard to ignore the creep of the far left into movements where it doesn't belong. There is no better example of this issue than in a series of tweets sent from Goldsmiths LGBTQ Society in defense of Soviet gulags. I'm sure you can imagine my shock when reading them. The problem began when the LGBT Society posted a list of gender-critical feminist Twitter accounts, announcing they were going to block them. This was in response to a recent revelation that Goldsmiths lecturer and trans activist Natasha Kennedy was behind a campaign aimed to smear and unseat academics she considers gender-critical or transphobic. I'm honestly surprised the group hasn't already subscribed to the controversial Turf Blocker account, which is favoured by the NUS's own LGBT campaign and alleged public flasher Jess Bradley. In response, Claire Graham, an intersex advocate who uses the Twitter handle MRKHTake2, responded that their allegations were fascist in nature. The comment was tongue-in-cheek, but the parallels were certainly there. In response, the Goldsmiths LGBT Society called for her to be sent to a gulag. Certainly distasteful, but arguably a tongue-in-cheek exchange. Whether the society would approve of the "it's just Bant's" defence, we don't know. Because when challenged on the reference to sending an intersex person to a gulag, they doubled down and went to great lengths to explain why they believe gulags were a force for good. Yes, gulags. To be clear, the following messages are real tweets shared by a real organisation associated with Goldsmiths University. The Soviets did away with life sentences, and the longest sentence was 10 years. Capital punishment was reserved for the most heinous serious crimes. As a side note, I should highlight more than 1 million people died in the Gulag system between the 1930s and the 1950s. The penal system was a rehabilitatory one and self-supporting, a far cry from the Western capitalist notion of prison. The aim was to correct and change the way of the criminal. If it couldn't be done in 10 years, it couldn't be done at all. Much like wider Soviet society, everyone who was able to work did so at a wage proportionate to those who weren't incarcerated, and, as they gained skills, were able to move up the ranks and work under less supervision. Educational work was also a prominent feature of the Soviet penal system. There were regular classes, book clubs, newspaper editorial teams, sport, theatre, and performance groups. So kinda like a Butlins, but in the Arctic Circle. There's so much more to add, but the reality is none of you actually care to learn about gulags. You don't care about what fascism actually is and how it fueled by anti-communist Orientalist myths and lies propagated by the CIA. They provided a link to a pro-Stalin website and ended by saying, "Long story short, friends, the ideas of TERFs and anti-trans bigots literally kill and must be eradicated through re-education. Science must be decolonized and de-essentialized in order for this to happen. #no TERFs on our turf." Take a moment here, because the Goldsmiths LGBT Society just praised a mass system for forcibly imprisoning and converting people deemed subversive, from political radicals, comedians, to LGBT people. Goldsmiths LGBT Society, in all seriousness, defended the most brutal conversion therapy system we've ever seen. Following a further outcry, Goldsmiths LGBTQ Society made their account private, saying, "We are protecting our tweets temporarily for the sake of safeguarding." This isn't safeguarding. This is hiding away for being called out when you praised brutal political enslavement. It doesn't take much research to thoroughly disprove the asinine comments made on how gulags could ever be considered a force for good. The Gulag Archipelago, written by Nobel Prize-winning author Alexander Solzhenitsyn, goes into great detail on the horrors of the Gulag system, which he encountered firsthand. And it's important to remember the Gulags weren't just used by the Soviets, but also by other socialist governments during the 20th century and even into modern day. Gulags are still in use in North Korea, for example. And in his book, The Tragedy of Liberation, historian Frank Decotta highlights how gulags were used by the Communist Party of China during the first decade of Mao's rule. Such camps were described by one prisoner as a carefully cultivated Auschwitz of the mind. The purpose of this video isn't to highlight the blatant historical inaccuracies, but rather that Goldsmiths LGBTQ Society felt emboldened enough to come out in defence of communist labour camps is a symptom of the rot which has infected identity politics movements, students or otherwise. And if this was going to happen anywhere, it was going to be Goldsmiths. The LGBTQ society has already defended state abuse and torture of LGBT people by expressing solidarity with Islamists when they shut down a talk by ex-Muslim Maryam Namazi. In 2015, Namazi warned about the impact of Sharia law on women and LGBT people and received intimidation from the Goldsmiths Islamic Society. Goldsmiths Feminist Society likewise defended the men threatening a woman. And let's not forget Bahar Mustafa, the former Welfare and Diversity Officer of Goldsmiths, who organised events specifically banning whites and males from attending, only wanting to cater to black and minority ethnic women, or NBs. She was investigated by police for posting "kill all white men" and similar extreme comments online. The LGBT Society's comments on the Gulag system are made particularly troubling when you consider their quote of how Gulags were more compassionate than the current prison system here in the West. In a previous video, I touched upon how the NUS trans campaign had put prison abolition, something they shouldn't even be commenting on, at the forefront of their political activism. And their own officer, who supports political violence against women and has been accused of exposing their genitals in public, also centres their activism on anti-prison and anti-police work. So it's not a stretch to say this line of thought is gaining more and more traction and that extremely warped perspectives are being promoted by the NUS. But just how widespread is it? Craig Warman, who recently wrote a piece on how he was called a Nazi at Goldsmiths for simply being a classic liberal, has explained to me there appears to be a small group of individuals who are members of various societies and are co-opting different movements to fit their own agenda. He also highlighted these groups aren't reflective of those they claim to represent. This is certainly true. Despite boasting membership numbers of more than 1 million, the NUS has shockingly low student engagement. Most positions in the various liberation campaigns run unopposed, with some getting as low as 2 votes to sit in the committee. I should remind you that Jess Bradley, who is alleged to have exposed their penis at their place of work and photographed it for an online blog, only received 61 votes to gain their position. And the women's campaign, arguably the largest, had just over 100 people vote for their officer. And so, grand titles, influence and resources are going to people with barely any proven support for their hardline views. These groups were all too easy to take over by the rabid left, who feel empowered enough to tell an intersex advocate they want her sent to a gulag and double down when challenged without believing they would face any consequences. Surprisingly enough, Goldsmiths Student Union actually took action because their own LGBT society openly supported the internment of LGBT people and has now suspended and disaffiliated the group pending an investigation. Hopefully they will also shut down the Soviet-style blacklisting being coordinated by their own staff. It's easy to ignore student politics as nothing more than young people live-action role-playing with their unachievable aims and lack of success. But these groups do have power, and so long as they claim to speak for a group of people based on the characteristic they can't control, whether it's race, sex, sexuality, or transsexuality, they must be challenged every step of the way. They're not just wasting money and embarrassing themselves. They are empowered to harass and slander anyone to the right of Owen Jones. So what do you think of the Goldsmiths controversy? Do you think the LGBT Society was rightfully punished for whitewashing the terrors of the Gulag system? Or was Goldsmiths Student Union a bit too heavy-handed for suspending them? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe, as well as follow me on Twitter. And I'm happy to announce I'm going to be starting a new live streaming series, The Rose Record, from this Sunday at 7 PM, where I'll be joined by special guests. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time. One thing people have been asking me for more of in my videos is Gatsby. I've been trying to get him to turn up into the videos. He has been in the room with me most of the times, but he just kind of sleeps. So here's a special feature just for this video. Let's get this. Look, there he is. See, he was here all along. He's just sleeping.